There is a man who has wronged you, who talks about you behind your back, who schemes quietly in the shadows of your life. Every instinct you have is screaming at you to respond, to retaliate, to make him feel what you feel. But what if I told you that the single most devastating thing you could do, the move that will unravel him completely, is nothing at all? Not weakness, not forgiveness strategy. Most men who consider themselves warriors are actually just reactors. They move when pushed, they speak when provoked, they reveal everything about themselves the moment someone presses the right button. This is not strength, it is a leash, and whoever holds the provocation holds the leash. The Stoic understands something the reactor never will. To respond immediately is to hand your enemy a map of your interior. And a man whose interior is known can always be manipulated. Marcus Aurelius ruled the most powerful empire the ancient world had ever seen, and he was surrounded constantly by senators who plotted against him, generals who envied him, and courtiers who whispered poison into every available ear. He did not exile them all. He did not rage. He did not make speeches about loyalty. He watched, he recorded his thoughts in private, and he waited not passively, but with the focused patience of a man who understood that time is always working for the disciplined and against the reckless. That is the first principle you must absorb before anything else in this video. Think about the last conflict you had, the argument, the betrayal, the insult you could not let go of. Now, think honestly. Did your response help you, or did it simply relieve pressure in the moment while costing you something larger? Every time you react from emotion, you spend a resource you cannot recover: your composure, your mystery, your perceived strength. The man who never seems rattled is not the man who feels nothing. He is the man who has learned to feel everything and show nothing. Here is what your enemy does not want you to know about himself. He is burning. Every action he takes against you, the gossip, the undermining, the provocations, is not power. It is desperation wearing the costume of power. He is burning fuel at a rate you cannot see yet, and you, by staying still, are not burning anything at all. Remember this the next time you feel the urge to strike back. The fire that screams is the fire that dies first. Silence, in the context of strategy, is not absence, it is presence without information. When you go quiet after someone has moved against you, you create something deeply unsettling in their mind: uncertainty. They do not know if you are hurt, if you are planning, if you even noticed, if you simply do not care. That uncertainty is more destabilizing than any threat you could make, because it forces them to generate their own worst-case scenarios and then live inside them. The ancient Romans had a phrase that soldiers understood deeply: festina lente, make haste slowly. It sounds like a contradiction until you have watched a reckless man destroy himself trying to outpace a patient one. Speed in conflict is seductive. It feels like progress. It releases the tension of waiting. But most of the damage done in any human conflict is done by the person who moved too fast, spoke too soon, and revealed too much before the moment was right. You have to understand what an enemy actually needs from you in order to understand why denying it is so powerful. What he needs is a reaction, any reaction, because reaction confirms that he has affected you, and being able to affect you is the only leverage he possesses. The moment you give him that confirmation, you validate his strategy and encourage him to continue. But the moment you deny it, with consistent, unbroken, almost eerie composure, you pull the only weapon from his hand. There is a particular kind of psychological torture, and I use that word deliberately, that comes from being completely ignored by someone you expected to wound. You have seen it happen. Perhaps you have felt it yourself. You said something cutting. You expected a flinch, and instead you got nothing. Not cold politeness, not visible effort to suppress emotion, just nothing, as if you had not spoken at all. That nothing burrows into a person and begins asking questions that have no comfortable answers. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journals, "Never intended for any audience that the best revenge is to not be like the person who harmed you." Read that again slowly, because it is not a platitude, it is a strategy. When you refuse to become bitter, petty, or reactive, you are not just taking the moral high road. You are executing a long game that leaves your enemy's tactics without a target. You cannot wound a man who has already decided not to be wounded. Now let us get concrete, because philosophy without application is just decoration. The first practical principle is this: when someone attacks you verbally, professionally, socially, your first move is always to buy time without appearing to do so. You do not need to respond in the moment, and in fact, you almost never should. A simple nod, a measured look, a brief acknowledgement that you have heard them, then you leave the field without explaining yourself. Time spent in their presence, after they have moved against you, is almost always a liability. The second practical principle: audit your own reactions before you audit your enemy's moves. This is the part most people skip because it is uncomfortable, but the reason you are reactive is almost never about your enemy. It is about an unhealed wound inside you that he has found. When a person can press a button and make you explode, that button is your vulnerability, not their power. The Stoics' first battlefield is always internal, and until you have fought and won there, every external conflict will cost you more than it should. Consider the chess grandmaster. He does not move the moment he sees an opportunity. He waits until the opportunity has fully ripened, until moving is not just possible, but decisive. Your enemy will offer you many premature opportunities to strike. A moment of weakness you could expose, a mistake you could amplify, a lie you could publicly correct. Resist all of them until the right moment arrives, because a premature strike warns your enemy, allows him to recover, and costs you the advantage of surprise. The third practical principle is perhaps the hardest. Do not tell anyone what you are doing. The moment you confide your strategy, even to a trusted ally, you introduce variables you cannot control. People talk, loyalties shift, and the story of your patience can be twisted into the story of your weakness by anyone who wishes to do so. Your plan lives and dies in silence, and the fewer minds it passes through, the cleaner and more powerful it remains. Secrecy is not paranoia, it is discipline. Watch what happens to the aggressive man over time. Truly watch him, as a scientist watches a specimen. His aggression requires constant fuel, new provocations, new audiences, new victories to sustain the energy. Without your reaction, he must escalate to feel the same impact, and escalation is always visible, always costly, and always eventually offensive to the people around him. You are not just waiting, you are watching him burn through allies, credibility, and goodwill while you conserve every drop of yours. There is a concept in strategy that military historians call strategic patience, the willingness to accept short-term disadvantage in exchange for long-term position. The general who retreats deliberately to draw the enemy into unfavorable terrain is not losing. He is designing the battlefield. Every time you absorb an insult, decline an argument, or walk away from a provocation, you are not retreating. You are choosing the terrain on which the final engagement will happen, and you are making sure it favors you completely. People always underestimate how much information they give away when they are angry. Watch a man in conflict, and you will learn everything about what he values, what he fears, what wounds are still open, and what lies he has been telling himself. Your enemy, in his aggression against you, is handing you intelligence you could never have gathered any other way. The Stoic receives this intelligence calmly, files it precisely, and uses it only when the moment demands it, never wastefully, never emotionally. Let me tell you about the nature of reputation in a conflict. It is the invisible battlefield, and most people do not even know they are fighting on it. While you stay composed and your enemy escalates, the people around you are watching and forming conclusions. They see his desperation. They see your stillness. They begin to draw their own narrative, And because human beings are pattern recognition machines, they will eventually arrive at the truth that the calm man is the strong man and the loud man is afraid of something. This is the moment in the video where I need you to sit with something uncomfortable, something that will make this whole strategy available to you or permanently unavailable, depending on your answer. Do you actually believe that you are right and that time will demonstrate it? Or are you using the language of patience as cover for fear? Because Stoic patience is built on a foundation of genuine confidence, the quiet certainty that you do not need to defend yourself because the truth does not require your defense. If that foundation is missing, everything else in this video is just performance. Because here's what changes everything. A man who is genuinely at peace with himself is almost impossible to provoke in any lasting way. Not because he does not feel the provocation he does fully, but because his identity is not attached to how others perceive him in this particular moment. Your enemy's power over you is precisely equal to your need for his approval or your fear of his judgment. Dissolve that need, and his weapons dissolve with it. This is not metaphor, this is the mechanism. Now we arrive at the role of observation, disciplined, patient, almost forensic observation of your enemy's pattern. Every person who moves against you has a rhythm. They escalate, they pause, they test, they wait for a response, they escalate again. Once you have mapped this rhythm, and you can only map it by staying still long enough to watch several complete cycles, you will know exactly when they are most vulnerable, most overextended, most likely to make the mistake that cost them everything. The fourth practical principle: maintain your output. This is the move that most devastates an enemy who expected to derail you. While he spends his energy on you, you spend yours on your work, your growth, your craft. When the people around you see that his campaign against you has not slowed you down, that you are still producing, still advancing, still focused, it communicates something that no speech could communicate, that you are operating at a level where his actions simply do not register as meaningful threats. There is a particular kind of enemy who is the most dangerous and the most easily undone, the one who needs you to be small in order to feel large. His entire psychology is constructed around comparison, and the comparison requires your diminishment. When you refuse to be diminished, not with anger, not with argument, but simply by continuing to grow, you pull the floor out from beneath his identity. He cannot compete with a man who is not competing. Let us talk about the specific torture of being publicly silent when someone has publicly moved against you, because this is where most strategies collapse. The pressure to respond publicly is immense. Your reputation feels at stake. People are watching, and silence can look like guilt or weakness to an uninformed observer. But here's what the Stoic knows that the reactor does not. The people worth impressing are always watching the quality of your response, not the speed of it, and composure under public fire is the rarest and most impressive quality a person can demonstrate. And here's the thing about public silence that most people miss entirely. It forces the aggressor to keep talking. And the more he talks without a counter-narrative from you to push against, the more his words begin to echo back on him. Without your reaction to point to, his accusations begin to sound increasingly like projection. Without your anger to validate his framing, the audience starts to ask the question you want them to ask: why does this person care so much? The fifth practical principle, and perhaps the most counterintuitive: be occasionally and genuinely kind to your enemy. Not performatively, not sarcastically, actually kind, in small and specific ways, when circumstances offer it. This is not weakness, and it is not forgiveness in the conventional sense. It is the most disorienting thing you can do to a person who has constructed an entire internal narrative around your antagonism. A man who expects your hatred and receives your calm generosity does not know what to do with himself, and a confused enemy is a weakened enemy. Now, I want to speak to the emotional reality of this path, because anyone who tells you strategic patience is easy is selling you something. There will be nights, and you already know what these nights feel like, where the injustice of it burns so hot that silence feels like complicity, where waiting feels like losing, where every instinct you have is begging you to just say the thing, send the message, make him feel it. Those nights are not weaknesses, they're the price of the strategy, and the Stoic pays that price in private so that his public face remains unreadable. Marcus Aurelius lost children, endured betrayal by those he trusted, governed through plague and war and conspiracy, and he never stopped writing in his private journal about the need to return, again and again, to equanimity. Not because he achieved it once and kept it, but because it had to be rebuilt every single day, sometimes every single hour. The Stoic is not a man who never breaks. He is a man who knows how to rebuild himself faster than his enemies can break him again. There is a moment, and if you stay the course, you will reach it when the dynamic shifts irrevocably. It is not always dramatic. It does not always come with a public reckoning or a visible defeat. Often it comes quietly. You notice that his moves against you have become smaller, more desperate, less confident. The audience that once amplified him has grown bored or skeptical. The energy he invested in undermining you has produced no return, and now the investment itself is the embarrassment. Let us speak now about the long arc, the years-long version of this, because some conflicts are not resolved in weeks or months, but in years or decades. History is full of men who were publicly humiliated, professionally destroyed, socially exiled, and who, through a combination of patient reconstruction and disciplined silence, outlasted every person who moved against them. The world has a short memory for those who do not remind it of old grievances, and a long memory for those who kept building when it seemed impossible. The sixth and perhaps most profound principle: do not make your enemy the protagonist of your story. This is the trap that defeats otherwise patient men. They spend so much time strategizing around their enemy that the enemy effectively occupies the center of their mental life. Every morning, they wake up thinking about it. Every decision is filtered through how it affects the conflict. This is a form of defeat that looks like strategy, and it is more corrosive than any direct attack because it is entirely self-inflicted. The Stoic does not arrange his life around the enemy's movements. He arranges his life around his own values, his own work, his own development, and the enemy becomes, at most, a peripheral variable to be monitored occasionally. Think of it this way: the sun does not alter its course because a cloud has appeared. It continues on its arc, and the cloud without the sun to define itself against simply dissipates. You are the sun in this equation. Act like it. Now, I want to address a specific scenario that tests this philosophy more than almost any other. When your enemy is someone inside your circle, a colleague, a supposed friend, a family member, the external conflict is difficult. The internal one is almost unbearable because the proximity makes silence feel like cowardice and patience feel like acceptance of abuse. But the principles do not change, only the precision required increases. You must be even more deliberate about what you reveal, even more careful about who you trust with your observations, even more committed to the slow work of repositioning. The seventh principle: when you do speak and there will come a time to speak, speak once, speak clearly, and then be silent again. The Stoic does not repeat himself. He does not escalate his language to be heard. He does not add caveats and qualifications and emotional appeals. He states his position with the calm certainty of a man who knows it is true, and then he allows the words to stand on their own. A single sentence delivered with absolute composure carries more weight than 1,000 words delivered in desperation. There is a reason the most respected people you have ever encountered in your life were not the loudest ones in the room. They were the ones who seemed to need nothing from the conversation, who could take it or leave it, who spoke when they had something to add and were silent when they did not. That quality, that radical sufficiency, is not a personality trait some people are born with. It is a practice built through thousands of deliberate decisions to withhold the unnecessary, and it is available to you right now in the very next conversation you have. We are near the end now, and I want to bring you to the deepest layer of this, the layer beneath strategy, beneath patience, beneath even philosophy. It is this: the man who has genuinely made peace with his own mortality, who has sat with the reality that he will die and that this conflict will not matter in 100 years, is the freest man in any room. Not because death makes things meaningless, but because it clarifies what is actually worth your finite energy, and almost no enemy qualifies. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He was not writing for philosophers in comfortable rooms. He was writing in a military tent, surrounded by dying soldiers during a plague that would kill millions, while governing an empire that was fraying at every edge. His philosophy was not theoretical. It was the daily survival protocol of a man who understood that the only unconquerable territory is the interior, and that every enemy's ultimate goal is to capture that territory through your own reaction. So here is the complete architecture of the strategy, assembled in its final form. You stay silent not because you have nothing to say, but because your words are too valuable to spend on the undeserving. You wait not because you are afraid to act, but because you understand that time is your ally and impatience is your enemy's hope. You maintain your output because your growth is both your revenge and your purpose. You observe because information is more powerful than emotion. And you keep your own counsel because the plan that is known is the plan that is already compromised. The man who masters this does not become cold, he becomes clear. There is a difference that matters enormously. Cold men are still reacting. They have simply replaced heat with ice, and ice is still a reaction to temperature. Clear men have moved beyond the reaction entirely. They see conflict as information, enemies as teachers of a harsh kind, and their own composure as the most powerful statement they will ever make. Clarity is not distance from life. It is the deepest possible engagement with it, stripped of the noise that distorts everything. Your enemy, whoever he is, whatever he has done, has given you something you did not ask for but cannot afford to waste, an opportunity to discover exactly how strong you actually are. Every provocation he offers is a test, and every test you pass without breaking makes you more durable, more precise, more composed than you were before he came into your life. The Stoic does not thank his enemies, but he does not waste them either. The friction that was meant to destroy you is the same friction that sharpens you. This is the final truth, and it is the one I want to leave sitting with you long after this video ends. Your enemy cannot defeat you. Only you can defeat you through reaction, through impatience, through the desperate need to be seen as right before the time is ready. Every loss you have ever suffered in a conflict, trace it back honestly, and you will find a moment where you broke first, where you gave away composure, or information, or energy that you could not afford to give. The Stoic strategy is simply the discipline of not breaking. That is all. That is everything. If this video reached something in you, if it named something you've been carrying without language for it, then consider staying in this space. There is more here. Deeper philosophy, harder principles, and the kind of thinking that does not flatter you but does fortify you. Subscribe if you want to be the kind of person who watches this kind of video not for entertainment, but because you are genuinely building something in yourself that cannot be taken from you. The work continues. And so do you.